Pull it up.
Yeah, I know. The camera angle is horrible.
Yeah, you can fix it. Stress, you pulling up the verse?
I got it. It's okay.
Bro, you had
I gotta share this first.
this guy's.
Yeah,
So
I need
I'll
that.
do it.
I need that.
Oh my god. You can just give it to me.
Okay. 3, 9. Okay. Yasya Avatara Guna Vidambanani Namani Ye Asuvigame Vivashaha Grinanti Te Anaikya Janma Samalam Sahasa Eva Hitva Samyanti Aparita Amritam Tam Ajam Prabhadye. Okay. Yashavatara Gunakarma Vidambanani Namani Yeshu Vigame Vivasha Grinanti Te Nakya Janma Shamalam Sahashaiva Hitva Samyantya Paritamritam Tam Ajam Prapadye Yashavatara Gunakarma Vidambanani Namani Yesu Vigame Vivashagrananti Te Naika Janma Shamalam Sahashaiva Hitva Samyantya Paritamritam Tam Ajam Prapadye Yashavatara Gunakarma Vidambanani Namani Yeshu Vigame Vivashagrananti Te Naika Janma Shamalam Sahashaiva Hitva Samyantya Paritamritam Tam Ajam Prabhadye. Please repeat. Yashavatara Gunakarma Vidambanani Namani Yeshu Vigame Vivashagrinanti Saikaika Janma Shamalam Sahashaiva Hitva Samyantya Privritam Tam Ajam Prapadye. Samyanta pravritam tam tamajam prapadye. Yaishavatara gunakarma vidambanani. Namani yeshu vigame vivashagrinanti. Vaivadibhama shamalam sahashaiva jhitva. Samyanta pravritam amritam tam ajam prapadye. Yaishavatara gunakarma vidambanani. Namani yeshu vigame vivashagrinanti. Vaivajvajamam shamalam sahashaiva hitva. Samyanta pravritam amritam tam ajam prapadye. Mothers. Yaishavatara gunakarma vidambanani. Namani yeshu vigame vivashagrinanti. Ye naika janma shamalam sahashaiva hitva. Samyantya bhritam amritam tam ajam prapadye. Okay, go for word for word. Yasya. Whose? Avatara. Incarnations. Guna. Transcendental qualities. Karma. Activities. Vidambanani. All mysterious. Namani. Transcendental names. Yea, those. Ashuvigame. While quitting this life. Vivashaha. Automatically. Grinanti. Invoke. Te. They. Anaikya. Many. Janma. Births. Shamalam. Accumulated sins. Sahasha. Immediately. Eva. Certainly. Hitva. Giving up. Samyanti. Obtain. Apavrita. Open. Amritam. Immortality. Tam. Him. Ajam. The unborn. Prapadye. I take shelter. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of Him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes His transcendental names, even unconsciously, at the time he quits this life is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains Him without fail. Purport. The activities of the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are a kind of imitation of the activities going on in the material world. He is just like an actor on a stage. An actor imitates the activities of a king on stage, although actually he is not the king. Similarly, when the Lord incarnates, He imitates parts with which He has nothing to do. In Bhagavad Gita 4:14, it is said that the Lord has nothing to do with the activities in which He is supposedly engaged. Na mam karmani lipanti na me karma paleshvaraha. The Lord is omnipotent. Simply by His will, He can perform anything and everything. When the Lord appeared as Lord Krishna, He played the part as the son of Yashoda and Nanda, and He lifted Govardhan Hill. Although lifting a hill is not His concern, He can lift millions of Govardhan hills by His simple desire. He does not need to lift it with his hand, but he imitates the ordinary living entity by this lifting. At the same time, he exhibits his supernatural power. Thus, his name is chanted as the lifter Govardhan Hill, or Sri Govardhandari. Therefore, his acts and his incarnations and his partiality to the devotees are all imitations only, just like the stage makeup of an expert dramatical player. His acts in that capacity, however, are all omnipotent, and the remembrance of such activities of the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is as powerful as the Lord Himself. Ajamil remembered the holy name of the Lord Narayana by merely calling the name of his son Narayana, and that gave him a complete opportunity to achieve the highest perfection of life. Oh my God, to me run the Shakananjana Salakaya Chakshu Militamina Tasmai Shri Gurena Shri Chaitanya Bisnam Sapitamina Buddha Leswayamu Bakadama Yanda Datis Vapadantika Vande Hum Shri Guru Shri Dapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnam Shri Rapam Sakatam Saharaganath Tamtam Shri Ram Sadaitam Savatam Parijan Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Laita Shiva Sakatam Hey Krishna Karna Sindhina Batochika Patiko Prasiko Bikakanta Radha Namosite Tapta Kanchako Rangi Radha Vrindavan Shri Vishabana Sita Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchaka Patu Vachaki Pasindi Payi Vachapatita Nam Parivayo Vaishnavi Pranamo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Sunivadi Pasachitasitarane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaya Namaste Namah Brahmane Namah Punaya Lokaya Mushma Vivajase Bhagataya Nirtaya Pitidave Karmane Namo Dhamma Vipakaya Michvidikadaya. All right, the translation. Your lordship is the Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes his transcendental names, even unconsciously at the time he quits his life, is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains him without fail. So these series of verses, Lord Brahma is going through. First, he was talking about types of worship of devotees who are, what's his word? Sakama. Yeah, Sakama devotees. Sakama and Nishkama. So those who are self-interested, they're practicing devotional service mainly for their own self-aggrandizement, more or less. But then the Nishkama devotees, those are the ones who are purely serving Krishna out of pure love for him. And this in this verse, Lord Brahma is exhibiting the nature of a Nishkama devotee. He's taking shelter of Lord Krishna, understanding that he's a shelter of all incarnations. And if you look at just this series of verses from even before this chapter, the previous chapter was titled Manifestation of Brahma from Vishnu. Lord Brahma, by his own endeavor, tried to find the root of his creation. He couldn't do it. He's perplexed. By his own endeavor, he became bewildered. He bewildered himself. But it wasn't until he surrendered unto Krishna where he was able to attain knowledge of existence of who he is and how to perform his duty. So Lord Brahma is teaching us that in order to attain any type of knowledge of who you are and the nature of this world, you have to surrender into Krishna. And he's kind of giving you in this verse an advantage of surrendering to Krishna. One advantage is that he says, you're certainly washed of the many sins of many births and attain him without fail. So this idea of being cleared of sins, a devotee doesn't have to worry about being sinless, because just by being situated in his constant position, just by chanting Hare Krishna, automatically millions and thousands of dormant sins are washed away, actually. But for you see other religious systems, they might go to, I don't know what it's called, where they have a priest next to them, and what's that, confession? Yeah, they have these confessions where they commit sins and they atone for them, but then they have this cycle of sinning and atoning. But a devotee doesn't have to worry about being sinless, because just by the practice of the Krishna consciousness itself, the practice of bhakti yoga in itself makes you sinless. And actually, being sinless is the first step in Krishna consciousness. It's the first step, the very first step in Krishna consciousness. You can't even approach Krishna without being sinless. Krishna is the supreme pure. He's the supreme gentleman. If you're a gentleman, you can only approach a gentleman if you yourself have a gentleman-like qualities. If you're a rogue or a rascal, the gentleman is not going to be inclined to even associate with you. So the process of Krishna consciousness is more or less making us pure enough so we can even come to a platform of associating with Krishna. So we as devotees, we become free from sinful reactions, and it's not something that we have to necessarily strive for. Just like we don't have to strive for liberation, we don't have to strive for dharma, we don't have to strive for economic development. Only thing we have to strive for is surrender to Krishna, and all other facilities are waiting for us. But nonetheless, the devotee is not necessarily interested in these. Even the verse yesterday, in the personal aspect of Krishna, devotee, if he wanted to, he can attain it, but it's hellish for him. It's non-different than, for a devotee, the impersonal aspect of Krishna, merging to that is non-different than hell, actually, because there's no activities. The nature of the soul is to want to have activities. The nature of the soul is to want to serve something. If we're not serving Krishna, then we're serving our senses ultimately, which is a cause of our sinful reactions. The minute become implicated in the material world, we're bound to commit sinful activities, because any activity that's not in relation to Krishna is sinful. And this could be hard for a lot of people to realize. There's a lot of talk like Mother Teresa. A lot of people say, oh, she was a saint, she was a great hero. She picked people on the street and gave them meat and steak and had them a place for them to die properly, and she was considered a saint for this. But ultimately, from a Krishna conscious perspective, she was actually sinful. And the majority of the population won't be able to understand this, because their idea of sin is more or less, people don't really even have an idea of sin. I was talking to this one Christian, and I was telling him that actually drinking alcohol is sinful, and he was saying, no, Jesus drank alcohol. So I asked him, so you're telling me if you go to church on Sunday and then go to the bar on Monday, you're telling me Jesus will be pleased with you? He said yes. He has no conception of what actually is sin, what is not sin, because if you're not in tune with the laws of God, then you're pretty much bound in ignorance. You kind of have your own mental speculations as far as what is good and what is bad. Without the understanding of the Vedas, you become a dharmic. The whole purpose of the Vedas is actually for us to act properly and not necessarily become free from sin. That's a byproduct. But the mass of society, because they're bereft of the knowledge of the Vedas, they're bound to act sinfully. And because they're bound to act sinfully, you have the results of sin. The results of sin is misery, actually. And you get miseries from the body and mind, from demigods, and from other living entities. So when it comes to the demigods, you have this collective karma. When you have mass slaughterhouses and you have gambling, you have casinos, you have the slaughterhouse education, naturally you're going to see disasters coming on in the world. I think it was in Turkey, it was like an earthquake, so many people died in that. It's a collective karma. As a result of their sinful activities, the demigods are being, it's their duty to, give them the reactions for it. But for a devotee, it was an anecdote with Prabhupada. I think he was in Hyderabad, yeah. And it was like a lack of rain. It hadn't rained in months. And they went out, they did Harinam in the streets, and then the rain came. Simply by the presence of Yajna, then the demigods are satisfied, and everything else becomes satisfied. But because we're bereft of knowledge of the Vedas, we are not inclined to surrender to Krishna. We're inclined to surrender to these material understandings of religion. Because ultimately, the body is a source of pain. The body is a source of pain. And the pain is coming as a result of our sinful activities. Like this verse is saying, it's certainly Washamili at many, many births, and you attain him without fail. So the goal of devotee is to attain Krishna, whether we do that in this life or the next. for devotees satisfied in this position, of course we want to go to Goloka Vrindavan. Nonetheless, we can have that consciousness of serving Krishna in this present life. Even Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that even a sadhana bhakta, a devotee who's just practicing sadhana bhakti, who doesn't have so much understanding of philosophical understanding of the sastra, he can still perceive the effects of Krishna consciousness. He can still perceive the bliss of Krishna consciousness even as a neophyte. Why? Because the process of bhakti yoga is so powerful that, like I said, it automatically makes you sinless, and it automatically gets you in connection with the supreme transcendence. So the position of a devotee is very rare and unique, actually. It's very rare and unique, and sometimes we can take it for granted how rare this opportunity is for us. Out of millions of births and deaths, what's it? Bahu Jamanamant, what's in it? So Lord Brahma, he was exhibiting jnana. So that verse I just quoted. The Gyanis, after millions of births and deaths, are speculating on the absolute truth. They finally surrender to Krishna. Lord Brahma, in the chapter before, was showing that for a Gyani, he was trying to find by his own endeavor the supreme truth, and it took him millions of lifetimes. No, it's in one life, but it said it took him millions of years. So many years passed him trying to, and then it wasn't until he finally surrendered where he was able to attain some type of peace. And actually, Lord Brahma was. He was scared. He was completely fearful, actually, because he was affected by the time aspect of the Supreme Personality Godhead. I'll talk about it a little later in the class. But ultimately, when we surrender to Krishna, that's the beginning of Bhakti Yoga is when you are able to perceive the fact that you are not the body, your spirit, soul, and you're able to have a relationship with Krishna. Can I see that? Actually, I'll do the, yeah. There's actually a verse in the 11th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, that talks about this direct, what's the result of surrendering to Krishna? You get direct perception of Krishna and the process of Krishna consciousness. You get direct perception. So devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things. These three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Person of Godhead. In the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. So it's interesting. Simultaneously, we are getting devotion, direct experience, and detachment from other things. A symptom of somebody who's advancing Krishna consciousness is they become detached from material activities. It's not artificial detachment. It's when you start becoming more attached to discussing Krishna and associating with devotees. Especially when one is frustrated with non-devotee association. This is a symptom of somebody who's advancing when they don't want to associate with non-devotees. They only want to associate with devotees because when you associate with devotees, naturally the topics of Krishna are bound to erupt. So we get this direct experience. Raja Vijay Rajagunam Pravichamidam Udamam Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmam. This is Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharmam. You can directly perceive how you're becoming freed from your past sinful activities through the process of Krishna consciousness. You can directly perceive it. But once we become free from our sinful reactions, we should actually be sorrowful that we committed boundless sinful activities in our past, actually. Even in this, I'm glad this verse in the purport actually mentioned Ajamil. It's a verse after Ajamil was delivered by the Vishnu Dutas. He was very remorseful, actually. He lamented his past misdeeds. He says, Din mam vikar hitam shabdir duskritam kula ka jalam hitva balam satim yoham surapim asatim agam. He says, alas, all condemnation upon me. I acted so sinfully that I degraded my family tradition. Indeed, I gave up my chaste and beautiful young wife to have sexual intercourse with a fallen prostitute accustomed to drinking wine. All condemnation upon me. And then Prabhupada says, this is the mentality of one who's becoming a pure devotee. When one is elevated to the platform of devotion service by the grace of the Lord and the spiritual master, one first regrets his past sinful activities. This helps one advance in spiritual life. I'll just read the whole purpose, it's not so long. The Vishnu Dutas had given Ajamil the chance to become a pure devotee, and the duty of pure devotee is to regret his past sinful activities in illicit sex, intoxication, eating, and gambling. Not only should one give up his past bad habits, but he must always regret his past sinful activities. This is standard pure devotion. That's pretty interesting. Prabhupada is saying we should always regret our past sinful habits. And you look at the teachings of the predecessor acharyas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Bhaktivinoda Thakur saying, I'm so fallen, I'm a fallen rascal. But he's a Nitya Siddha. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is a Nitya Siddha. Narottam Das Thakur he's a liberated soul. So they're showing us how we can come to the platform pure devotional service, but we're so foolish that instead of regretting our past sinful activities, we boast in them. Oh wow, I did so many nice things, in my past and before Krishna consciousness. I was so much respected before I came into the society of devotees. Blah blah blah. But no, Prabhupada's saying clearly we should always regret our past sinful acts, because by doing so, you're not going to want to be inclined to commit further sinful activities. Although we are being freed from our sinful reactions, it's stated in Nectar Devotion that we have so many stocks of desires just stored in our heart. I think, in our heart, that at a slight provocation, even one of those seeds can germinate. So we have to be very conscientious. What's the word? Conscientious. Anyway, I can't speak today. We have to be very cognizant of you have to understand, we through all our lives we accumulate more and more desires, and even after coming to Krishna consciousness, we might be becoming free from it, then something might come in our head like, whoa, where did that come from? It's because our past activities, although we're becoming clear, the desire is still there. Actually, the desire for it is still there, even though it hasn't germinated yet, but the desire is there. But the way to fully drown the material desires is by cultivating spiritual desires. This is the secret to success, actually. When you cultivate spiritual desires to serve Guru and to serve Krishna, to be around the Vaishnavas, this is the way to overcome your lower desires. Ultimately, the Buddhists, they want to stop desires. You cannot stop desires. Desires is inextricably linked with the conditions, with the soul. But when we cultivate spiritual desires to serve Krishna, then what happens is we come from the platform of being Sakama Bhaktas to Nishkama Bhaktas. Ultimately, with Sakama Bhaktas, the reason why they are self-interested is because they still have their material desires. They're practicing Krishna consciousness, but they're doing so with the guys who are trying to fulfill the material desires, like the demigods. And because of that, they're becoming ever more frustrated. But for the Sakama Bhaktas, they have cultivated the necessary spiritual desires to subdue their lowest tendencies. And because of this, they're able to relish Krishna consciousness at every step. Prabhupada says at 24 hours a day, we should be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. This is not a chore. This is reality, actually. If you look at these pictures, 24 hours a day, Krishna and his devotees are engaged in transcendental activities. And it says in this purport, where does it say that? His acts in that capacity are all omnipotent. And the remembrance of such activities of the incarnation of the Supreme Person of Godhead is as powerful as the Lord himself. So by remembering Krishna's actually, Krishna, there's many reasons. I think Michavan gave a class on Janmashtami, and he was talking about the different reasons why Krishna appears. There are different, just a lot of different reasons, actually, limited reasons why Krishna appears. But one reason that I can cite is Krishna actually performs pastimes for our deliverance, because he performs pastimes, so when we remember his pastimes, we can become connected with him. As it says in his purport, by remembrance of Krishna's pastimes, we can also be in touch with Krishna. So remembrance of Krishna comes by proper hearing and chanting. This is a gradual process. All begins with hearing, as this verse is interesting, actually. If you look at the verse, I can actually go to it. we're at 3. This was like a verse that was talked about maybe a couple days ago. Let's see. Let's go to the index. It talked about the glories of hearing. It's right. Yeah. Oh my Lord, your devotees can see. Everybody can see. Yeah. Oh my Lord, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed. And then it talks about performing, acts of charity, blah blah blah. And then in this verse, it talks about chanting. In verse 15, it talks about, let me take shelter of him, one who invokes his transcendental names. So first, Lord Brahma is teaching us how we can approach Krishna. First, we do it by hearing, by bona fide hearing. And then by bona fide hearing comes bona fide chanting. And then the purport Prabhupada is talking about bona fide remembering. So we can't just jump to remembering Krishna's pastimes. First, we have to hear, we have to read, study. We have to study, we have to be studious. Everybody in the Krishna conscious movement should, regardless of your varna or ashram, we should actually always be students of the scripture. Because by studying the scripture, we can chant properly. So it is very important to become a sincere devotee. And the only way to become a sincere devotee, like I said previously, is to relinquish our material desires in the service of Krishna by chanting his transcendental names. It's very powerful. The thing is, Krishna's names is really hard to conceptualize with our material minds how powerful they are actually. It's actually very mysterious. It says in this verse, where's that word? Mysterious. Yes, Vindambanani. In the word for word, there's a word Vindambanani, all mysterious. Krishna is all mysterious. Even you see bogas being offered. Can we see Krishna taking the boga, turning the prashadam? No, we can't see it, but we know that it's happening because of faith. So Krishna is mysterious, his devotees are mysterious, and his pastimes are mysterious. Because anything related to Krishna attains the same qualities of Krishna. Like if Krishna is mysterious, then yes, one quality of a devotee is being grave. Nobody, when Prabhupada, devotees made this. They always said that when they saw him, they never knew what he was thinking. He was grave. He was very mysterious. They didn't know what his next thought or move would be. Because when you're connected with Krishna, you work on the will of Krishna. Instead of working on your own mental faculties, you start working on the spiritual faculties of surrender, and that comes through surrender. Lord Brahma is teaching us how we surrender to Krishna and what's the advantages of surrender. Ultimately, because we're conditioned, we think there has to always be an advantage to something. Like, for example, we go out, we buy some boga, or we go, whatever, buy a car or something. It's like, oh, you buy this, then, you get this discount or this. And, it's like, oh, wow, what's the advantage of me doing this? Ultimately, as a conditioned soul, always is seeking an advantage. So Lord Brahma is telling us these advantages, but ultimately, for those who know about Krishna consciousness, we're not really seeking advantages. Because we realize that the highest aspiration is just to serve Krishna, regardless of the things that might come from that, whether it's an advantage or disadvantage. Actually, there's going to be a lot of reversals when we start practicing Krishna consciousness. There's going to be a lot of reversals. Things are not going to go our way because Krishna is mysterious and he will act in our lives in such a way that he will purify us through the reverses in our life. So we have to be sincere. We have to lament our past sinful activities and realize Krishna is just purifying that dormant desire in our heart to still enjoy without him. And on the point of being mysterious, one thing that's also mysterious, I don't want to talk too much about it, but is this time aspect of Krishna. Time is very mysterious. This is actually a series of lectures where His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj gives on this word sanat. The first one is mysterious time, because what is time actually? You can think about it as time. What is it? It's actually I'll start right there. So this is actually in this canto. We passed this verse. O Vidura, while searching that way about his existence, I was just talking about this. Brahma reached his ultimate time, which is the eternal will in the hand of Vishnu, and which generates fear in the mind of the living entity, like the fear of death. Time is fearful. Why is time fearful? Because under time is birth, death, old age, and disease. Actually, I was reading. Let's do this. What's right here? Yeah, so by the mercy of Rishikesh Prabhu, we can look at Guru Maharaj's lectures and we can like kind of just like, I just did some research on this. And Guru Maharaj says that like the mouse in a treadmill running frantically, getting nowhere, and just the wheel is spinning purposelessly. So in the same way, time is that element which is the interface between the living entity's desire and the material nature which they attempt to exploit. Due to the desire to exploit the material nature, they are injected with the material nature. They're injected within it. And this is pretty interesting. Pretty much, even Prabhupada said in 1974 that time is in between the spiritual element and the material element. It's like the via medium, actually. It's not necessary. It's in between material and spiritual. It's eternal. It is eternal. But time is the medium where the living entities can, as it says right here, exploit material nature. Due to the desire to exploit material nature, injected within material nature, and time is the via medium to give them facilities to do so. It's the interface between living entities' desire and material nature. And time ultimately destroys all our activities. Any activity performed in this material world is destroyed, but activities of devotees is never gone in vain. It's never diminished or reduced. So the way to, as Lord Brahma, he was fearful of this time element. He realized, he was searching and searching and searching. He became fearful. It wasn't until he surrendered unto lotus feet of Krishna where he became free from this fear. He became free from the influence of time because he was situated in his constitutional position. And even while we're practicing Krishna consciousness, we shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, the day's going by so slow. Like, oh, I can't wait for the weekend. This is materialists are always hankering for the weekend because they're subjected by the time factor. But for a devotee, time is not something that's necessarily affecting a devotee because every day there's unlimited activities for a devotee to perform. Cooking, learning mridanga, chanting, going out on books, reading, making flower gardens. There's so many things, unlimited activities for a devotee to perform. And we should never get bored with the process of Krishna consciousness. When we start becoming bored when the process of Krishna consciousness was happening, is we're becoming influenced by the time factor. Boredom, time breeds boredom. But Krishna consciousness is naturally blissful. We should never become bored in the process of Krishna consciousness. If we become bored, then, like I said, we have the wrong understanding of what Krishna consciousness is. It's not meant for our enjoyment. It's meant for the enjoyment of Krishna. And ultimately, even in this verse, on another point, because it's kind of running out, but talk a little bit more about this this translation. It says that in the purport, Prabhupada says that let's go to it. What's this? 5 or 3, 9, 15. Yeah, so in the purport, Prabhupada says the activities of the incarnation of the Supreme Person of Godhead are a kind of imitation of the activities going on in the material world. So I know this was talked about previously, but it's always good to talk about it. But ultimately, this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. When Krishna comes down and performs activities, ultimately, the material activities in the material world are all imitation activities. It's not that any activity that's performed in the material world is actually an imitation of the spiritual world. It's not like the material world is like we're trying to be like the spiritual world. No, I'm sorry. It's not like the spiritual world is trying to imitate the material world. The material world is imitating the spiritual world. And this banyan tree talks about this, how it's a perverted reflection. This Ordva Mula Madash Shakam Mashvatam Prayuravi Yamchadamsi Yashaparnini Yastam Veda Savedavid Adash Torvam Prasatatasha Shaka Guna Praveda Vishai Pravalaha Adasha Mula Yanushantitani Karmanu Bandini Manusha Loke. Karmanu Bandini. This is the most important point of that. So what those series of verses talks about this material world. Like the branches are, are different. I don't remember the exact. I don't want to go to it, but it just describes what the different material elements are in relation to this tree, this banyan tree. But it says Karmanu Bandini Manusha Loke, that we're tied to the tree by how? How are we tied? By our activities, karma. By our karma, we're tied to the material world. By karma, we're tied to time. By karma, we're inflicted by fear, by the fear element. Karmani madini manushaloke. So how do we get out of this time element? Na rupa masheha tato balapite na to na chidi na chasam pratishta asvatami na suvaruda mulama sanga shashina jadina titva. We get out of the time element by detachment, by the weapon of detachment. This ashra, the weapon ashra of detachment is the means to get out of your karmic activities and the reactions to your karmic activities. So when we hear about Krishna, when we remember Krishna's glories, then we can be situated in the real form of reality. We think this is reality. The activity is going to the material world, but it's only perverted reflection. And as Prabhupada is saying, the activities of the Supreme Personality Godhead is ultimately the activities in the material world are imitation. And he's an actor, so Krishna doesn't have to. I didn't want to go too much into the Leela of Krishna, but ultimately Krishna doesn't have to assume this cowherd boy form, and he doesn't have to lift up Govardhan Hill. He can do that all by his will, actually. In the past time when there was a forest fire and his cowherd boyfriends were in trouble, Krishna didn't have to actually be there to relinquish the fire. He could, because ultimately Krishna is everywhere. Actually, Krishna's everywhere. He exists everywhere through his Paramatma feature. So Krishna could have extinguished the fire even without him personally being there in his original form. But he did so for our benefit, so we can remember his glories. And ultimately, Krishna likes to enjoy it. He enjoys these pastimes. He enjoys killing demons. It's facilitated because in the spiritual world, there are no demons. So he comes here he has that fighting spirit, so he comes to the material world to exhibit that. He doesn't have to do it, but he does it ultimately for our benefit. Well, his real reason is for him to enjoy it. That's there. But for our understanding, he does it for our benefit. Because the nature of devotees is able to see what reality is. He has to distinguish reality from illusion, what the real version of this tree is and what the false reality of this tree is. But like I said, by the cultivation of spiritual desires, we can be situated. It says that this banyan tree is situated on the water of desire. So when you're looking on the bank of a river, you might see a pond of water, and you see the reflection of the tree on the water. And Prabhupada says that the reflection of the tree, like I said, so it's two sides of the trees, one that's in the water and one that you're seeing right there. But it's situated in the water of desire. So through desire, we can actually come to the real form of our true nature, actually, through the cultivation of spiritual desires. And we do that by being absorbed in remembering Krishna. Even in this translation, what is this? Where does it say it? And the word for word, it says, Amritam. Amritam, immortality. Amritam, immortality. Well, Amrita can have different meanings. We also know it can mean nectar. But ultimately, the process of Krishna consciousness, when we become situated in contemplation, we become immortal. The thing is, there's the pastime with the demigods and the churning in the milk ocean. Both of them were foolish. The demigods and the demons were foolish. Why were they both foolish? Because they're both chasing this nectar, but of this amrita. But this nectar was ultimately, it wasn't the nectar of Krishna consciousness. It's the nectar of material facilities. So both of them are actually foolish, actually. Nonetheless, because Krishna is inclined towards his devotees, he's going to always assist them, even in getting that. That's why he performed the pastime of Mohini Murti, of bewildering the demons, so the demigods can get the nectar. Nonetheless, the real nectar isn't with trying to live in this material. So those who are less intelligent think immortality means being in the material world. So actually, the demigods, it said that they might not experience, when the higher you go up, death like us, but they will at the end of the universal devastation. Then that's what they'll die. But so their idea of immortality is just staying to the end of the universal devastation. But this is for less intelligent. Those who are truly intelligent are going to try to be situated in the immortality of spiritual life. Because that's ultimately who you are. You are already immortal. You don't have to strive to be immortal. You already are immortal. But because you have forgot who you are, you become conditioned and you think you have to be immortal by material nectar. But it's fearful. When the demigods fall from heaven, it's painful for them actually. It's very painful. They're seeing, all the facilities that they had and they're falling down the material world. It's very painful. Because they're affected by this time factor. But like I said, even a neophyte devotee, those who are even practicing sadhana bhakti can relish the effects of Krishna consciousness. And there's a verse in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Guna Netana Tichantin Dehi Deha Samud Bhavan. What's the last? Let's see. Yeah, Guna Netana Tichantin Dehi Deha Samud Bhavan Janma Mrititra Dukar Vi Mukto Mritam Asnute. See, Amritam is in this verse as well, nectar. So in the other verse, in the verse today, Amritam was translated as immortality, and this is translated as nectar. So when the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and distresses, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. Even in this life, we can understand the bliss of Krishna consciousness. We don't have to wait to die for it. But we have to transcend the modes of material nature. We have to transcend. These gunas are bounding us. It says another translation of guna is rope. We're bounded by the ropes of our activities. And we're forced to commit sinful activities life after life. Life after life, we're forced to commit sinful activities. Why? Ultimately, because of lust. By being situated in the mode of passion, you become implicated in the modes of material nature. And then you burn in the fire of lust. Avritam Gana Mantina Ganino Nitavarina Kama Rupina Konteya Dushran Analinata. Dushran Analinata. We're burning in the fire of lust by being situated in the mode of passion. But the spiritual master, Samsara Davanana Lila Loka, he's the ocean of mercy, and he's coming to relinquish this burning fire by giving us an opportunity to serve him. By serving the spiritual master, he's giving these facilities for us. Just by his presence, he turns anything to a tirtha. By his presence, he's giving us an opportunity to serve him. Ultimately, we're all meant to serve Krishna, and the spiritual master is the immediate medium for us to do so. The spiritual master is expert in engaging all his disciples in the service of Krishna. He's seeing all the qualities of disciples, and he's able to see how they can also enjoy this amrita, this nectar of immortality. But nonetheless, like I said, the goal of a devotee is not necessarily it's like not trying to be word jugglery, but amrita, they want to experience amrita, the immortality aspect of it. But as far as the nectar aspect, that's, the devotee doesn't really care whether he's just receiving bliss or not. They just want to serve Krishna. And you can only do so by being free from this time factor, by cultivating strong spiritual desires. If your desire, so if you're going out on books, Gumaraj gave a lecture on how to be successful in book distribution. And he says that the way to do a lot of books is your desire to give them Krishna has to be stronger than their desire to be in Maya. And you have to understand, these materialists have a very strong desire to stay in the material world. The desire is extremely strong. So how much stronger does our desire have to be? So we have to be nishkama bhaktas. We have to be nishkama bhaktas. We have to work in such a way where we're not becoming self-interested. We're only interested in deliverance of others, and we can only have this level of selflessness through full surrender to Krishna, as Lord Brahma is teaching us in this verse. Take shelter of the lotus feet. Let's just go to this verse one more time before I wrap up. 3, 9, 15. Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnation and qualities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. Let's take shelter of him who is mysterious. Let's take shelter of him whose names, even chanted unconsciously, will wash boundless stocks of sinful desires and activities away from our hearts. I had a friend when I was in school. He would say, "Oh, you going to the Hare Krishna temple?" He would like make fun of me, and I would say, "Where am I going? The Hare Krishna temple. Where?" And then because he would say Hare Krishna, even though he's being a kind of he's kind of messing with me, but he's actually getting purified by doing so. Actually, just by being associated with devotee, we're the real humanitarianists because we're able to deliver those from the cycle of birth and death. Just by seeing a devotee, they get purified. Just by seeing the tilak of a devotee. Just by seeing the tilak, your sins get washed away. Just by touching the book of Srila Prabhupada, you become sinless. The potency, how potent is this process? It's so potent. So we should surrender. We should see what reality is. And without fail, we will attain Krishna, as this verse is saying. We will attain him without fail. So I'll stop my class here and I'll open up for any comments, questions, corrections, anything like that.
Hare Krishna.
How do you
A couple things, if there's time. But so there's one verse. This is kind of relevant to your class. You know this one. Ahore haranti vaipumsam udar yast astam chayan asau tasherte yakshano nita uttama sloka vartaya. So the translation is both by the rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead.
Yes. Beautiful.
So that's a nice verse.
That's a really nice verse. That's in the 4th canto, right?
Second canto.
I think there's another one in the 4th canto. It says something similar with before they sorted King Pranjana. But yeah, it's really nice. It's like the rising, because you don't even think about it. Like the rising and setting of the sun, like your duration of life is being diminished. You don't think about it. But for devotees, like, you're not really affected.
So I had some questions, but anyways, we can see. So my first question is, so with Sakama and Akama, devotees you're talking about, and Prabhupada references that a lot in his books.
Yeah.
So do we understand that like mainly based on like the devotees, I guess like mental attitude, or like his like aspirations or desires? Because we see like the demigods, like they're like actively kind of like pursuing like the material desires,
Right.
Whereas like a devotee may be like struggling with those desires, like, you know what I mean? Like they know like,
Yeah.
hey, I shouldn't do this, but
I think so Prabhupada says, I think this what I was talking about Sakama devotees, it was talked in class previously, and I just pulled it up. So Prabhupada says the demigods are called Sakama devotees, or devotees with material desires in mind, while the pure devotees are called Nishkama devotees because they have no desires for their personal interests. So from my understanding, Sakama devotees are self-interest because they do not think of others. So from my understanding, of course, even the thing is, we might not be pure devotees, but if we're at least trying to practice pure devotional service, then there could be some distinction there. But I think for demigods, more or less, I think Prabhupada's making the point that they're more or less self-interested because they're more concerned with their material happiness than they are with trying to deliver others. And that's why, they say they're taking those demigods who are starting to be intelligent are trying to take birth in Kali Yuga because this is the best opportunity to kind of, become more selfless. But ultimately, from my understanding, most demigods are like self-interested because they're not necessarily thinking of others and more so just thinking more of how they can enjoy. So that's my understanding. Yeah.
and then one more. So at one point, you were talking about, you referenced Ajamil's pastimes.
Yes.
So just saying, like Prabhupada was making that point in the purport that we should regret, like, whatever sinful activities like we've done in the past.
Right.
So my question with that, I have two questions with that, but I guess the first one is that something that like a devotee is like vocal about, or is that something that's just like kind of one's own personal like budge on?
I think there should be, of course, some. The thing is, like, I said this yesterday in Prashadam Hall, that actually depression could be another form of sense gratification. Because, you're depressed. Gumar said this, actually. Because depression is you kind of you feel, oh, I'm such a fallen rascal, but you're doing so in the attitude of people consoling you. Oh no, you're good. It's like a form of sense gratification, falling in this depression. So, from my understanding, it should be like an internal like meditation. But if we're always vocal about it, then it kind of gears towards more sense gratification than it is for actually benefiting ourselves. Because if we're always vocal about all that sinful activity we've done, then it's like you just want people to take pity on you, and it's not really the mood of a self-realized soul. Is they want people to take pity on them. Like even though, like Narottam Das Thakur, he wasn't singing these bhajans for people to take pity on him. He was genuinely feeling that. He was genuinely feeling that he was falling. Bhadrinath Thakur was genuinely feeling that. But I think that when we kind of are overly vocal about it, then what happens is we're more so seeking the attention rather than actually having that feeling. And the thing is, this feeling is coming naturally. I guess in the beginning it could be artificial, but naturally when you start getting a higher taste and you're like, whoa, I got a higher taste and I can't believe I wasted so much time in these nonsense activities. So even that feeling is something it's a symptom of a devotee who, like Prabhupada saying, is advancing. But it's not like we should artificially do it. Maybe in the beginning, but it should come to a point where it's natural. Like I said, a sadhana bhakta, sometimes he has to do artificial things for him to, be situated in his right position. But it shouldn't be something done for sense gratification. So yeah, that's my understanding. Okay. Anybody else? Yo. All right, so.
That got me thinking. So, like, in like the case of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's like songs and like, Howdy Humility describing his fallen position, was that something he wrote and then like gave to the public, or it was like his personal journal and then like it was found and like revealed?
I'm not really sure actually. You know Kalkiru or Michivan? I'm actually not too sure about that.
Those all get like did they get published in his time, or because I know one of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's, I know somebody was like, I think he had a dream or something, and then they said to get all those songs together, publish them or something.
I'm not sure. It could be differently. Some are obviously written for propagation,
Yeah. But some of them weren't. It's just like his feelings are just like songs that he actually felt. I don't know if his intention was for like everybody to know his feelings. I'm not sure about that. I mean, yeah.
One thing also just in conjunction with that is that like it's both there on like both sides of the spectrum with Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about that also. But he also like goes, I mean, anyways, it's a whole topic in and of itself, but from, like Dainya and humility and everything, like teaching is like Sharanagati. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur like develops from like pretty much like regretting one's like past and sinful activities and such. But then he goes all the way to like revealing like his position in the spiritual world. So it's like both things are kind of like there. And anyways, it's also understood that like you're not like so open with those things, but then he was open with those things too.
Right. I think whether his intention was for people to know that, that's something I don't really know. But
Yeah.
we can like do some more research into that. But I think Mataji had a question. No, it's for the people online because we have a like connector so that they can hear your question.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class. It was very interesting. My question is more so towards raising children and teaching them how to like advocate and speak up for themselves. Is that considered self-interest?
What do you mean as far as speaking up for themselves?
So, like when, for instance, if one of their friends are treating them unkindly, and you're trying to teach them about, how you can stand up for yourself in a way of just being able to be kind and telling them, that hurt my feelings. I wish that you wouldn't say that, have you again, but letting them understand that you saying what does hurt so that another person can understand that that is a form of hurt?
Yeah. The thing is, as Christian, being situated in Christian conscience doesn't necessarily mean we like let people take advantage of us, nor does it mean that we don't have to have some type of material situation to better us, our spiritual situation. So I would say that's not necessarily self-interested, as long as the mood of understanding. Okay, what you saying as far as like in school, or your kids in school or something, or?
Yeah, I mean, because you talked about depression and how if you're speaking and saying it over and over, that might be more so a form of self-interest. So it's one of the things where they're trying to get them to advocate and stand up for themselves in that nature, but also just not having like identifying with diagnosis and things of that nature.
Identifying with diagnosis.
Because in school, it's more so talked about as far as like, being able to have your voice be seen and being heard.
Yeah. That's okay. So that's one thing I can talk about. One thing is, well, two things. I'll start here. One, a devotee is trying to work in such a way, even if he's dealing in material activities, that he's able to elevate himself and elevate others around him. So if he's in a situation where others are disturbing him and disturbing others around them, then yes, it's the duty of a devotee to correct them. Nonetheless, this whole idea of, this is not necessarily what you're saying, but this is the whole idea of your opinion matters, my opinion matters, everybody's opinion matters. Well, if you say everybody's opinion matters, then, okay, anyways, my Guru Maharaj says this, so like, what about the opinion of like Hitler? Does his opinion matter? So you say all opinions matter, but when it comes to somebody who has a malicious opinion, their opinion doesn't matter. So when it comes to Krishna consciousness, we have a higher understanding of life and certain moral values. The thing is, the Varnashram Dharma system is meant for us to work, do our spiritual duties, but also if we have material things we have to take care of, then yeah, it teaches us also how to do that. So it's not necessarily being self-interested if your goal is to elevate in Krishna consciousness. Okay, if your goal is to be popular in school, then yeah, it's self-interested. I'm gonna speak up for myself so that they can respect me. Okay, no, this is not a proper mentality. If you have a mood of, okay, I want to practice Krishna consciousness and they're disturbing, my activities while I'm just trying to do my duty, and you say something so you can lessen the distress, then yeah, that's not self-interested. It's all about the mood of how you're going about it, ultimately. But yeah, that's the whole point of Varnashram Dharma, is just to facilitate certain material situations like this while also cultivating Krishna consciousness. Okay. Anybody else?
And if I can ask another question.
Yes.
Sidebar. Can you explain more of who is Vishnu and
Vishnu? Mm-hmm. Well, ultimately, Krishna and Vishnu are the same. So, okay, Krishna. Okay, that's like a whole loaded question. I'll just be try to be simple. But Krishna is the original Supreme Person Godhead. He has two hands. Vishnu is more so known to have four hands, but ultimately they're the same. It's just Vishnu is an incarnation of Krishna, and he is so you have Goloka Vrindavan, which Krishna is pretty much the central object, and then you have Vishnu. He's also Krishna, but he's in an expansion of Krishna, where he has four hands. So, but ultimately, whether you surrender to Vishnu or Krishna, you can still attain it's not like, oh, we encourage to surrender to Krishna because he's the original. He's the original Supreme Person Godhead. But it's not like if you worship Vishnu, then we're condemned. It's not like that. So in a nutshell, it's a lot that can be said about that. But okay. Anything else?
no?
Okay. Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.